Welcome to my film about one of the most extraordinary birds in our skies, the common swift. These birds spend almost their entire lives in flight, eating, sleeping, and even mating on the wing. And yet for a few brief summer months, they return to our towns and villages to raise the next generation. In this film, I'll introduce you to the remarkable world of swifts, how they live, why they matter, and what makes them so unlike any other bird you'll ever encounter. And then I'll show you practical ways to attract swifts to your own home by making and hanging swift nest boxes to make your home their home too. Finally, we'll embark on a journey through an entire breeding season, from the moment the swifts arrive back to the building of nests, the hatching of chicks, and the fledglings taking their first leap into the unknown. You'll see their story unfold from start to finish. So settle in, look up, and let's begin our exploration of the incredible life of Britain's best bird, the common swift. There's approximately 113 species of swift in the world, though the exact number can vary depending on the specific taxidermic authority you follow, and are found globally except in the polar regions and some other remote areas. They're known for their aerodynamic shape, long sickle wings, and superb flying abilities, spending most of their lives in the air. Common swifts are migratory. Their summer breeding range runs from Portugal and Ireland in the west, across to China and Siberia in the east. They breed as far south as northern Africa in Morocco and Algeria, with a presence in the Middle East in Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, and Near East across Turkey and the whole of Europe, as far north as Norway and Finland, and most of subarctic Russia. Swifts migrate to Africa by a variety of routes, ending up in equatorial and sub-equatorial Africa, excluding the Cape, although they do occur there as vagrants. Common swifts do not breed on the Indian subcontinent. Their Latin scientific name is Apis apis, from the ancient Greek word meaning without foot or footless, referring to the fact they appear to have no feet as shown here in flight, as the majority of people would have seen them. However, they do indeed have feet, ending in sharp claws, but due to their mostly aerial existence over the millennia, their feet are slowly evolving away and are now mostly used for clinging as shown here, rather than walking, which they do very badly. But what they lack in walking ability, they make up in spades with their absolute mastery of flight. They are incredibly efficient flyers, carried along by their stiff 40 centimeter long sickle-shaped wings, reaching speeds of about 110 kilometers an hour in level flight, catching insects on the wing with ease. They are some of the fastest birds on the planet, built for a life on the wing. No other bird spends as much of its life in flight as swifts do. Some birds go in 10 months without landing, eating, drinking, sleeping, and even mating, all in flight, which is incredible really. Swifts spend about 3.5 months in Africa and about the same on their breeding grounds in the north. The rest of the time they are either flying to or from these locations. Unsuccessful breeders, fledglings, and sexually immature birds are the first to leave their breeding grounds. Breeding males follow next, and finally the breeding females. Generally, breeding females stay longer in the nest to rebuild their fat reserves. The time of departure is often dependent on the light cycle of shortening days. Our birds here in Western and Central Europe cross the Iberian Peninsula and northwestern Africa, and so the Alps don't factor as a barrier in their migration. The western group of swifts mostly follow the Atlantic coastline of Africa, otherwise they'd have to cross the Sahara. Once they arrive at the humid savanna, they turn southeast to arrive at their winter feeding grounds. Some sexually immature 1-year-old birds will remain in Africa their first year. In Central Europe, the swifts return in the second half of April and the first third of May, and like to stay in lowlands and near water rather than in high places. In more northerly regions, the swifts arrive later. The weather along the journey has an enormous influence on their arrival date, so in one region, the swifts may come back at various times from year to year. Swifts don't breed in the southern hemisphere and return to the north each year for about 3 months to breed, mostly choosing to breed on man-made structures, but it wasn't always like that. Historically, they used to breed on cliff faces and in tree cavities, in vast ancient forests. However, the almost complete removal of these ancient forests from their nesting range has resulted in the adaptation to man-made sites. This was a fantastic resource for the birds, as our forefathers weren't very good at blocking up all those nooks and crannies in the buildings that the swifts love so much. Sadly for the birds, over the years we have become very efficient builders, almost too efficient, making our structures almost airtight, blocking up all those drafty holes in our buildings, massively reducing nesting opportunities, and as a result, swift numbers have plummeted. But this is where we as swift lovers can step in and do our bit, artificially recreating those nooks and crannies they love so much by installing swift nest boxes on our homes. There's also recently been a push by campaigners to make it a legal requirement to have a swift brick installed on every new build in the UK, but as of late 2025, this has been unsuccessful. So it's up to us now to provide nesting sites for our declining swift populations around the UK. And so with this in mind, I thought I'd show you what I did to attract my swifts in. There is tons of valuable resources out there on the web you can use in order to buy or make your own swift boxes, so you can use any of those you like. I just found that the Action for Swifts blog website, the most informative, with a lot of excellent information and nice clear plans for making a variety of different Swift boxes. I might add here, I'm not sponsored or affiliated to them in any way. I just found them personally to be the best for my particular needs. I'll put a link to their web pages for you in the description below. So when I decided to make my own box, I went straight there. On their DIY Swift box design page, I selected the box design that would best be suited for my physical situation at home. And for me, that was the Zeist Nest Box designed for under eaves. These boxes are incredibly simple to make, even with limited DIY skills. Action for Swifts gives you nice clear drawings on how to assemble the box and even a detailed cutting plan to maximize the amount of boxes you can get from a standard 2440 by 1220 sheet of 12mm waterproof ply. Of course, I wanted a duplex in the hopes of building my Swift colony in the future, so I adapted mine slightly to have 2 compartments. To increase the longevity of your box, I would either use solid timber or, like I did here, marine ply, which has excellent moisture resistance. To increase this even further, you can also weather seal it with the appropriate products. I happened to be weather sealing my garden shed at the time, so just used that product and exterior paint on the box, and it's been bulletproof for years. And also, as you'll see later, I also felted the roof because it stuck out beyond my eaves a little. The other thing I do, which wouldn't be necessary in your case, is I take my box down each winter, but only because I have all my camera equipment installed inside. What you see in here are artificial nest cups. Swifts will build their own over time using feathers and other nesting material collected floating in the air while out flying. They lay their eggs into them to stop them rolling around the cavity, keeping them together. So giving them a starter kit like this increases your chance of a quick take-up of the box. You can leave them as is or round them off nicely like I did, but it doesn't really matter because the Swifts will fix them how they like them anyway. The entrance hole on a Swift box is very specific and can't be messed with. Its dimension is 70mm wide by 30mm high. Any bigger and birds like starlings will get in and ruin your chance, as they start their breeding season way before the Swifts even arrive. Any smaller and the Swifts won't use the box. I lowered the entrance hole closer to the floor of the box, but again, this was my personal preference. As I mentioned, I never left the cup in its raw state, but fashioned a nice bowl out of bonding plaster and used one of my wife's nice cereal bowls to push into the wet plaster, forming the curve. I also cut a wedge-shaped ramp up to the cup to make it easier for the Swifts to get up there, which ended up working a treat. This was glued and nailed into place. Something else I did that was also unnecessary was to collect downy feathers while out walking on my local reserve. Once the plaster in the nest cup dried, I placed a whole bunch of these in the cup as a starter pack for the Swifts. Whether they were used or replaced by the Swifts, I'll never know, but it made me feel better putting them in there, so in they went. Here I finished the box with its new exterior paint job and nice new felt roof. As you can see from the date I placed in the top corner, I finished the box just in time before the Swifts arrived back in the UK, way back in 2022. Getting Swifts to nest in your box for the first time can be a game of patience, and can take several years to be successful, and maybe not even then. But there are a few tricks at our disposal to help draw them in, which will improve our chances massively, and I'll show you these a bit later on in the video. Next up is the positioning and hanging of the box, the single most important decision of the whole experience. A lot of people ask me for guidance on where to hang their boxes. Sadly, there's no single defining answer to this, but here's a few simple guidelines for you to follow. 1. The box must be at least 5 meters off the ground and preferably under the eaves. When swifts leave the box, they basically free falling until they generate enough speed for their wings to start working, so a high location is a must. 2. Place the box north or east facing. I was lucky enough to have the perfect wall, which gets nice warm sun early morning when they need it most, and then by no later than 8 or 9 in the morning the box is in the shade for the rest of the day. Temperatures in the box can get crazy high, and it's not pleasant to see the chicks suffering inside. 3. Make sure the flight path into and out of the box is free of obstruction. Swifts have no go-slow mode and actually hit the box on their way in at about 15 to 20 miles per hour. I can actually hear them entering the box right through the study walls. So if you follow these 3 steps, you're in for a good chance at being successful. And now for that trick we had up our sleeve to help the swifts find your box and draw them in, and that is playback, where you play their calls back to them using a speaker. Swifts are very social birds and like to nest in colonies. I found they responded almost immediately to playback and came down to investigate the immediate area around the box, and more importantly will briefly land and stick their heads in to see if the box is occupied or free for use. These birds doing so are known as knockers, almost as though they're knocking to see if anybody's home, and are the ones you're looking for. Again, there's a variety of ways to do this, from purchasing dedicated player amplifiers as shown here, to the much more budget-friendly option I used of a simple Bluetooth speaker playing the calls I downloaded from a well-known free website database of bird calls, which I'll link in the description below for you. But here's a top tip: if you want to stay on talking terms with your neighbors, or if your partner is anything like mine, the continuous playing of swift calls drove her crazy in about 5 minutes, so here's what I did. I never played them continuously. Swift gather in numbers in the early morning and late afternoon. So when I got home from work in the late afternoon and actually saw the swifts above my house, I'd quickly play the calls, placing the speaker right by their box, and in they'd come, saving everyone's sanity. And then sadly the long waiting game started. I had a bunch of swifts investigating my box all of 2022 and all of 2023, but at the end of each season, after checking the box, I discovered it went unused. But I never let it get me down and kept at it. No matter how long it took, I was in it for the long haul. And then 2024 rolled around, and I had noticed somewhere someone had painted the areas below their box's entrances black, making the entrances appear larger than they were. So I followed suit in the hopes it might catch a passing swift's eye and tempt it in. I'll also mention here, I put my box back up each spring a little before the swift's return, and then block the holes up with scrunched up newspaper to prevent unwanted guests moving in, because it would break my heart for the box to be taken up by another species of bird, ruining my season, and then remove the paper on the first sighting of swifts above my house. The season passed pretty uneventfully until one day I happened to be standing by my windows when this happened. I wasn't using playback at the time and hadn't noticed any coming or going up until that point, but knew immediately something was afoot. They almost certainly weren't breeding in the box this year, as swift often take a year checking the box out, preparing the box for the following season, building up the nest cup and roosting in the box overnight. I guess making sure it's fit for purpose for the following breeding season. And this is where we take up the story at the end of the 2024 breeding season. It is now the end of August, and I have removed my swift box off the front of the house for a bit of maintenance and a little upgrade. My swifts have long gone. They left on the 23rd of July, so they absolutely haven't been disturbed at all. And so I'm going to lift the lid now for the first time, so you'll be seeing it as I see it. So this is the roof that's coming off. Okay, so I did sort of prep the boxes with a bit of feathers, which are now in a little bit of disarray around the cups. So I'll just replace those.
looks like they have been sitting in this one a little bit. But of the two compartments, this is definitely the one that's been used the most. You can see the little cup there is well established. I don't think they bred there this year. I just had a bird that was overnighting there every night. So I think that's a precursor for breeding next year, which I'm very excited about. And with the one breeding, because they like to nest in colonies, it may bring in another into this compartment. Well, that's the hopes anyway. But they're definitely using this compartment. You can see how compacted this is. This is really hard, like almost like it's full of saliva kind of thing in the little cup that I prepared for them. So there's a high likelihood that they'll use this next year. So what I'm going to do is I've got two really nice webcams, which have a little light when they come on as well, so I can see in the dark. Full HD, so I thought I would put a webcam into each compartment for the next breeding season, so I can monitor the breeding season and just enjoy them from the comforts of my study. So the plan for this winter is to try and figure out a little mounting system, something like that. I'll have to test the angles and things, but I want to capture as much of the compartment as possible. I don't know whether that angle is actually going to catch them coming into the entrance, which is down here. Earlier this year, I actually painted the bottom of the entrances black in the hopes that when they fly by, they'll see it as some sort of cavity, and it seemed to have worked. So they started using it almost immediately. So the idea is get these webcams mounted so that we can have a bit of a entertaining next year, hopefully. But yeah, very interesting. So only one of the two compartments has been used, but the hopes is that the breeding pair will bring in others because they are colony nesters. And then if this one gets filled, I will then start producing more nest boxes, much to my wife's dismay. So yeah, let's see what happens. I'll get these installed and I'll take you along for the journey. The other thing I'm going to do this winter is I'm just going to chamfer this leading edge, make it a bit smoother, so when they hit the entrance at 20 miles an hour, which they do, I can actually hear them hitting the box from within the study. They hit it so hard because they don't really have a go slow mode. I'm just going to take this sort of hard edge off here and just make it a little bit easier for them to enter the hole at speed. So I'll do that both sides and then maybe just give it another lick of paint because it's been up for 2 winters now. So this is the little webcams I'll be using. You can see the little light on the front there for seeing in the dark, hopefully. What I've just done is I've temporarily connected it to my laptop. That's me. Hello. And so I'm going to want to connect it something like so. So it's pointing directly down at the nest cup. And that is the view that we'll end up having through the breeding season. So that'll show us and allow us to see when the adults are in, when the eggs are laid, how often they get fed, how often the adults remain, whether they're overnight, just roosting or actually breeding. And I'm going to do that for both compartments. I'll mount another one here as well. Just so that we double down just in case we get a tenant in this side as well. So that's the little project for this year. But yeah, we should give us some great visuals through the season. Welcome back to my little Swiftbox project. It's been some months since I've recorded anything regarding this little project of mine, and it's been so long, in fact, that we are now in a new year. And the breeding season is just about to start. We're about a month away from our swifts returning. It's the 28th of March, so I thought I'd take the old swift box off the shelf in the shed and carry on and get these webcams installed. So where we left off was
that the left-hand side of the duplex was used last year, and so I'm hoping the female returns and then they breed this year. So today's little project before they return is get these webcams installed. What I've actually decided to do, because the just one in each box is not going to cover the whole box, I want to kind of place it there. So if we have a look at the camera view, that covers basically just the nest cup and the right hand side of the box, but I'm not going to be able to get any footage of them landing and commuting from the hole to the next nest cup. So what I'm actually thinking of doing is installing 3 webcams. So one there to cover the nest cup, and another one pointing this direction, which gives quite a nice view of the hole as they come in. So I've basically got the whole box covered. And then, not to lose out on anything arriving on the right hand side box, I want to install a 3rd camera here covering the nest cup on that side, just in case my current pair bring in a 2nd pair. And also I want to monitor what's going on in this box throughout the season as well. So I'm looking to install 3 webcams instead of just 2. So I'm going to start with this box because I need to go and get another webcam. So I will install the 2 in here so long and test it out. I want to see how dark it's going to be with the lid back on the box. Like I said before, they got a little lights on the front, so if it's totally dark it will illuminate a little bit in the cavity, so it won't be a total loss. And obviously during the day the light from the hole will illuminate the inside a bit. Well, I'm hoping so anyway. So yeah, so let's get these cameras installed, and I'll have to go and get the third camera for this side. So as before, I've drilled a 6mm hole through the dividing plate, and I've got a little bolt with a washer on it, which I'm going to feed through from the other side. And there's just enough thread sticking out on this side for our conveniently placed 6mm hole underneath the webcam to screw onto. It's quite easy to install, a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. So it just screws on there. And that also allows me to obviously change the angles up and down, and also the head tilts as well. And that gives me the following view. So now between the 2 cameras, I've got the whole box covered. Obviously this camera has the nest cup and this one has the entrance. So we won't be missing any action throughout the season. I would love to have a camera here pointing straight at the entrance to see the swifts hitting the box at sort of 15 miles an hour. Would be pretty impressive to see. So yeah, so whole box covered. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the roof, and I'm going to pass these cables through little channels straight out the back of the box. So that it's all neat and tidy and it doesn't get in their way. And then one more camera for this side, because swifts love to nest communally, and my current pair may or may not bring in a 2nd pair. If they do bring in a 2nd pair, I will be ecstatic, to say the least. And then I will have to get a 4th camera to record them coming and going from this box, but that's a little ways off yet. So yeah, nice neat little job. Easier than I thought it was going to be with the webcams that I've got, and the sort of 6mm screw thread underneath each webcam has made the installation very, very easily done. So the other thing that I've done that I forgot to tell you is that earlier in the season I just softened this leading edge around the hole with a file. It was sort of 90 degrees with lots of sort of sharp edges. So I've just rounded that off, not a lot, just to make it easier for them to into without ruining their flight feathers, etc. Okay, so now I've taken the roof off, and so this is just a top-down view for you of the box. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to cut a little channel in this back plate and pass the cables through like that, which will then go through to my study window, which happens to be only 1 or 2 meters away. So this one will go just like that, and the same for the camera that I'll install on this side will just go straight out the back like that. So yeah, it's going to be a nice neat little job at the end of the day, I think. Not too many dramas. So just to show you, that's with the cables running out the back of the box, just at ceiling height there, and they will come out the back as such and go through to my study window. So that's what it looks like. So now it all depends on how dark it's going to be in there with the roof on and things like that, but I'll do some testing before I hang the box, etc. It's been a few days since I've installed my webcams into the Swift box, and I've done a little testing, and unfortunately the little lights on the front of the webcams are definitely not strong enough to illuminate the inside of the box with the lid on, unfortunately. I thought they were going to be, but they're not. So I'll just show you what's happening. So that's what the view looks like with the lid off, nice and bright and clear. And if I replace the lid, I unfortunately get an almost black screen, which is obviously not going to suit us for recording the comings and goings of the Swift during the season. So what I've had to do, I've had to source a external lighting system to illuminate the boxes, and the lighting system has got to meet some criteria for me, and that is it's got to be remote controllable, because you don't want the lights on all the time, of course, and they also got to be dimmable, because you don't want blindingly bright light disturbing the birds. And so what I've done is I've gone online and found this brand here called iBow or Airbow. It's just bog standard kitchen under cabinet downlighters, and they meet all my criteria. So this is what they look like here. They actually come with 4 downlighters, but I only need 2, 1 for each box. So you can add or remove however many downlighters you need. They go into this little transfer box, into the remote control receiver unit, and then obviously into the power. But most importantly for me is it comes with a remote control, and it's got 2 functions. Obviously it's RF, so it doesn't need line of sight. I can control the lighting system from inside my study, which is literally just 1 wall away. So as you can see, using the remote control, you can turn on the lighting system. And the nice thing about this, it has all these different shades of colors that you can use. So I will more than likely be using the white during the day and maybe the red at night, to avoid disturbing the birds. And the other nice thing about these lights is that they have a dimming switch as well. So you can go up in brightness or down in brightness to almost off. So I'll just show you what that looks like with the white as well. So that's max power, which obviously I won't be using, and then you can come down, single click in to the lowest setting, which I will more than likely be using most of the time. As I said, controllable through the wall, which is quite nice, because the nest box is going to be on the outside on the front of my house, and I don't want to have to climb a ladder every day to turn them on and off. So controlled through the wall, which is quite nice. And So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to install each of these downlighters to the roof of each side of the next nest box, so one in each nest box, and then I'll do some testing again. Okay, so that's the sort of the top of the box that I've removed, or the ceiling, and I've measured equal distance from either side to the middle of the box. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to screw the downlights to the ceiling. So the nice thing about these, they have a little screw-in front plate that you can take off, and that shows you the 9 LED lights with 2 screw holes. And I'm just going to place them like that, with the cable going out the back of the box. And I'll just put 2 screws in each downlighter to hold it in position. Okay, that's both downlighters screwed to the ceiling of the box, so I'm just going to replace the lenses. These downlighters are almost perfect for what I need. I just hope they are robust enough to last through the breeding season, because once the birds start nesting, I am definitely not going to be interrupting them. So if anything fails, it's going to fail for the whole season, until I can get nest box down after the breeding season and do maintenance. So they're perfect, I just hope they last. Okay, so that's the 2 downlighters in position. Those cables will go straight out the back of the box and into my study. There's about 6 foot of cable, so more than long enough to get to my window. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the box back together, connect everything up, and do a little test run. So I have now replaced the ceiling. So as you can see, there's a little light between each of the webcams there, and of course there's only going to be one webcam in here for now, because this is the side that's not been used. So that's what the little downlighters look like, and if I turn them on, I've got them connected up. So that's what it's going to look like. Hopefully there will be enough light. Of course I can always increase the brightness, but I'm not going to be doing that because that's just going to freak the birds out. So I'll be within the first 1 or 2 clicks for sure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to replace the lid, and then we can have a look and see what the webcams look like now. Okay, I've put the lid back on, and as you can see, without the lights on, completely dark, which is no good, of course. So we are now going to turn on the lighting system for the first time, you and I, to see what's going to happen. So again, using the remote control, which is important. Turn them on. Hey, excellent. So I think I've got that on the lowest brightness, which is amazing because it's so clear. So if I just bump up the brightness using the remote control, okay, so that's maxed out. So with the camera compensating for the light, even on the lowest setting, which is going back down to there, it's still amazingly bright inside. So I think the camera is compensating for the amount of light in the box and boosting the sort of visuals. So that's excellent news. I can have the brightness almost off, like on the last available setting, to avoid disturbing the birds. So that'll be the day sort of setting. And then at night I'll go to the red, because I don't think birds see red that well. So to not stress them out even further at night, I will probably use the red setting, which is that. Not great, not as good as the white. Let me go up in brightness a bit. Yeah, it's not as good as the white light, but for nighttime setting, I think that's going to be more than adequate to see what's going on. The aim of the game is to record the birds and not to make them leave the box. So the least amount of disturbance, the better. So I think that low light red setting for night viewing is going to be more than adequate. And then going back to the white light, that for the day.
So I'm really, really stoked with that. That's come out better than I'd hoped. So if I just lift the box again, that's what it looks like inside with the two lights. And then sitting in the comfort of my study, I can turn them on and off, which is amazing. So I'm really, really happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is I just need to bring home one more webcam to put in this box, in this side, and then I will be hanging them this weekend. So I think it's now the 1st of April, around there. So we still are a month and a bit away before the birds start arriving. So I've got plenty of time to put it up and do yet more testing from within the study to make sure all the system works fine. Do a few test recordings and then pray that my female or the pair of swifts return for the breeding season, which I'm super excited about. Right, it's now the next day and the final piece of the puzzle has arrived. My third and final webcam for the right hand side of the box, which, like I said before, doesn't have tenants in it just yet, but I still want to monitor it just in case some come in. Now the problem I have with this third and final webcam is that I can't mount it slap bang in the middle like I have done for this side, because there's a bolt running through there. So I've got to slightly offset it, which means that the display has the nest cup to the left hand side. So if you have a look at the screen there, it's slightly to the left of the screen, which for my OCD is not going to play ball. So what I've had to do is I've just cut myself a little wedge, and I'm going to slide the wedge in behind, which is going to tilt the camera a little bit towards the nest cup, just like that. So I'll put a bolt through the camera, through the wedge, through the partition, and have it pointing directly at the nest cup. So if we have a look now at the screen of the computer, slap bang in the middle, and that will suit my OCD just fine. So I'll get that marked up, drilled through and bolted, and then once that's in place, I'll run the cable through a little notch that I've cut in the back, and I'll be ready to place the box up on the wall this weekend in the hopes that our swifts will return. Okay, that's it. All three cameras are installed. The third and final camera with its little wedge in behind to direct the camera at the middle of the nest cup, giving this lovely view, slap bang in the middle, nice and clear. So now we just have to pray that my current pair bring in a second pair, which will be absolutely amazing. And one last thing that I'm going to do, as I've been walking around my local nature reserve, the Hogsmoor Local Nature Reserve, I've been collecting sort of downy feathers. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scatter some more in this side. Not a lot, just to give them something to use straight off the bat without having to collect them themselves. This side did originally look like this, all nice and fluffy, but they cemented it down with, I presume, their saliva. So I'm just going to put a little bit more in there, just so that they can line the bottom of the cup if they so wish. Otherwise they can remove it. And then the next thing would be to put the lid on. I'm going to put the top on, should I say. The lid I'm going to leave off because it adds weight when I run this heavy box up the ladder. So I'll put it on the wall without the lid on, test everything, make sure all the angles are correct, that the lighting works, and then add the feathers to this side just a little bit, put the lid on, and then we are golden. And then also I'm going to block up the holes with scrunched up newspaper until my birds arrive, and then I'm going to remove them because I don't want another species moving in and effectively ruining a whole season for me, even though I think the swifts will evict them. They're pretty hardcore with eviction, so I don't think I'll have a problem. But just for peace of mind, because I'd hate for another species to start breeding and then get evicted out of the box. So block up the holes, and then the first night that I see them in the sky, I'll whip them out and we'll be golden.
So all very exciting. We're on the downward slide now. Now it's just a waiting game. I'll also just show you here, while cleaning out the box, I found a little Swift pellet, which is amazing. I haven't opened it up yet, but I presume it's just going to be full of insect carapaces. And then I found these weird little black buttons. I have no idea what they are from, but they definitely weren't in the box when I built the box, so they've been brought in somehow. I'm not sure if it's, I don't know, an insect or something. I know the swifts carry mites sometimes, and I really don't know if they are the eggs of those or whatnot. I have no idea. So once I do a little bit of research, and if I find out what they are, I'll get back to you on that. Okay, so after a little bit of Googling, I found out what these nasty things are, and they are pupating swift lousefly. So what happens is the adult flies cling onto the swifts, the adult swifts, which then bring them into the box. The lousefly then lay larvae, which then pupate in these little black capsules over winter, and they coincide their hatching with the first eggs that are laid in the box. And once the chicks hatch, they then cling on to the chicks and actually end up drinking their blood. So they're quite nasty little critters. So it's just as well I found them in the first place and did a little bit of research as to what they are. So yeah, they are parasites, and I will be destroying these as soon as possible, because I definitely don't want those in the box parasiting my young swift chicks if they do breed in the box.
Mark Smith very kindly allowed me to use his footage of an adult lousefly clinging to the back of a swift investigating one of his boxes. You can see here they are incredibly efficient at holding on to their hosts, transporting themselves into nesting cavities where they produce larvae, placing the next generation in direct contact with their new hosts, the chicks, the following summer. So I'm extremely happy I took the time to investigate what these were and remove them from my box.
Okay, it's the 6th of April, and I'm about to install my swift box up there under the eaves. That wall is southeast facing. It gets nice and warm in the early morning, and then just as the sun starts getting hot, it goes over the roof and shades the box the entire rest of the day, which is just perfect, I think, for my swifts. So what I'm going to do is I've just removed the lid and also the feathers because they're blowing around in the wind. I'll install the box and then pass all the cables and things through the study window, attach them all, and then run some tests on my PC up there, make sure that all the camera angles are still fine, test the lights, etc. And then I'll go back up and put the lid back on, seal everything up, screw it on, and then the waiting game starts.
Pull them one at a time. Make sure they're maxed out, because they've got to reach through that window there. And hopefully I'll have enough length on all of them. Okay. Box is nice and secure, so it's just the lid I need to put on and then pass those cables through the window. Okay, I've now come up into the study just to show you. So that's where the cables have been fed through. I've now added USB extenders to the webcam cables to reach the PC, and I've also attached the power supply to the lights, which luckily for me is long enough to reach the power sockets under my desk. So if we now close the blinds to just shade out the light for a sec and come to the PC, I'll just show you what the views currently look like. The cameras are a little bit out of aligned after the installation, but just to show you right away what they look like. So that's camera 2. That's sunny camera 3 in the right hand box. And camera 1, which is obviously out of line because it's got to be pushed up a bit so it covers the entire nest cavity here, just the nest bowl. So I'll get my wife to sit in the study and I'll go up the ladder again and get her to tell me up or down, left or right. So we have it nicely placed right in the middle. So I'll do that now. Okay, the moment of truth. Can I control my lights inside the Swift box from within the study? Just so that you know, this Swift box is literally outside. I've run the cables across a single window and up through the vented window. And this is what the nest box looks like inside with just the lid on, no lights on. It's surprisingly bright, much brighter than I had when I was testing it in the shed. But even so, let's turn the lights on. So that's all working fine. It's an RF sending and receiving unit, so it shouldn't be affected by line of sight. It's all through sort of radio signals. And let's test the red. That's for nighttime viewing. I think the red light will be less sort of invasive for them. Just go back to the white. So that's all performing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add a last little bit of feathers to each cup, and then I will screw the lid back on, and that'll be it. We'll have to wait a month or so until the action starts, hopefully. Okay, so with a few runs up and down the ladder, we have changed the angles of the cameras. The focus spot of the camera is now directly over the nest. So that's camera 1, camera 2, which is facing the nest hole of the same box. Also nice and centralized there. And then camera 3 in the right hand box is overlooking the nest cup. And amazingly, that's without any lighting on, which definitely didn't look like that when I was testing it in the shed. So I probably won't need to use the lights at all during the day, which is fantastic. So back to camera 1 in the left hand box. So this is the box that I think will definitely get used if they return this year. So this is where all the action will be happening. Okay, and finally with the extra feathers added to each nest cup. So that is the left hand box. So that's the box that will hopefully get used this year. And then just go to camera 3, which is the right hand box. All good to go. And I've now screwed the lid back on, so it's all done and dusted. Right, okay, one last little look at the nest box with the cables running from the box into the top window of the study. As you can see, the box is already in shade, and it's about 11, half 11 now, so from now on till the rest of the day it's in the shade, so midsummer that's perfect. And this is what the box looks like up close, with all the electrics running out the top and into the study window here. Of course, I'll tidy up that mess now when I go back inside, and I think I'll cover this in conduit just to protect it against the weather. And I'll be taking many photographs through that window, point blank. Okay, and last but not least is the view I have from inside my bedroom. Literally point blank view of the nest box. So if I sit here in the evenings, this is where I used to see them flying in and past the window. And this is the side of the box that they used. So literally 30 centimeters away from my window. So that's the view that I'll have from there.
On the 8th of May, I was walking home from work towards my house when directly above it I spotted a pair of swifts. They were very clearly mine because they weren't flying away but seemed to be rejoicing at being home, by swooping low over their house, hunting and just plain having fun overhead. They were back. I ran the last little bit back home, got the ladder out the back garden, and quickly pulled out the newspaper blocking their entrance holes. The breeding season had officially started. And then a little bit later that same evening, one of the birds came straight in to roost. Over the following days, the birds would come and go from the box, sometimes spending extended periods just roosting in the box, preening and having a good old sleep, almost as though this was the first time in months they could just let themselves go completely and rest up before the chaos of raising chicks started. The first order of business was to clear out all my feathers I'd placed in the box at the start. Clearly my choice of feather wasn't up to scratch, which is why I said it wasn't necessary to put them in there in the first place, and that the birds would do their own nest building. The birds would also spend several minutes looking out the nest hole during the day, and this is the first shots of them doing so. Every night, bar one nervous night for me, both birds would roost together overnight in the box. What surprised me here was how affectionate they were towards each other, snuggled up together in the nest cup, preening each other before sleep, obviously reinforcing their bond for the season. Swifts mate for life and will return to the same nest site year after year. Interlopers may attempt to steal the box, but generally these are seen off by the resident pair. When you're evolved for a life in the sky and your whole body basically becomes a wing, this isn't really conducive to a life in a box. So remembering how to maneuver around a tight space takes a little bit of practice, especially at the start of a season. It gets even trickier later on when there's 4 of them in the box. Basically, it ends up being a box full of wings. These initial days are spent doing housekeeping, and after removing all the free feathers I'd placed in the box, the birds started bringing in feathers of their own choosing. And like just about everything else they do, this is done on the wing. It's not just feathers they bring in, but anything suitable for nice soft bedding for the chicks. So grasses, soft greenery, and even soft seed heads floating in the air are collected and brought in. These are then stuck down using their saliva, and over time will build up into a natural nest cup. The nice thing about having cameras in the box is I knew when they were looking out the hole and would then sneak around the front of the house for a quick photo. On the 13th of May, 6 days after their return, I turned on the cameras at 7 in the morning to check on the birds and nearly had a heart attack when I found a second bird in the right-hand nest box, along with one still in the left. Normally my birds would roost together in the left-hand side compartment, so immediately thought I had a second pair investigating my boxes. But sadly I just think it was one of my birds simply entering the wrong side the night before and slept there the night on its own. This is the only time I had a bird in that side of the box all season that I know of. Of course I checked that night again and they were back in the same left-hand side box as per usual. As I've said, every night was spent together with loud calls as they greeted each other for the night. The nights were spent preening each other and then slowly drifting off to sleep. It was interesting recording their returning times as the season progressed, and the birds would return later and later as the season went on. Interestingly, my latest returning bird was past 10 o'clock in the evening, in complete darkness. I was like a worried parent waiting for their kids to arrive home after dark. Another thing they did was to fly in for the night, have a little walk around the landing area, and then chatter between each other, and then one bird would leave again in almost complete darkness, only to return again shortly after, almost as though making sure it was too dark to fly. Another interesting thing I learnt is that swifts are late risers, and even more so when the weather is bad. The weather affects them a lot. It wasn't uncommon to have both birds still in the box between 7:30 and 8 in the morning, with the latest leaving to feed at around 20 to 9. Of course, swifts feed on the wing, and if the weather is miserable or if it's too early in the morning, their food source is not yet on the go, so why bother wasting valuable energy chasing something that's not there? Nest building takes place almost throughout the whole season. Even when the chicks are well developed, the adults continue to bring in nesting material, cementing this down with saliva. In this shot you can see some greenery has now been brought in as bedding material too. Unfortunately, this gets inadvertently dragged out by the departing bird. The normal morning routine would be the birds waking up in the nest cup, then a little time preening themselves and each other before moving out of the nest cup into what I like to call the landing area, where they'd sit for a bit, often side by side like this, or preening each other before one bird takes the plunge for the day, followed shortly after by the second. On a few days I check my cameras and find both birds asleep in the box. They were apparently not doing much in there other than just hanging out together. Perhaps they were preparing themselves for the onslaught that the chicks would soon be bringing to their lives. The rest of the day on the 20th was spent bringing in yet more nesting material, building the nest cup further, before calling it a day at around 9 o'clock in the evening. Most days the birds would be away from their house for hours on end, during which time they would obviously be feeding and no doubt mating too. But my favourite time of the day was early evening, when flocks of swift would appear over the house, flying low over the roof and even in between my and my neighbour's house, so low and close to me I could hear their wings cutting through the air, an amazing spectacle. It almost felt as though they had all been out feeding and were now dropping my swifts off before moving on, because that's exactly what happened most evenings. My swifts would then stay behind as the main flock would then move off and disappear into the distance. On the morning of the 22nd, I witnessed something I had always been told they only do on the wing, and that was to mate, but they were doing so inside the actual box. I was lucky enough to catch this behavior twice on camera, so having the cameras in the box was a steep learning curve for me. Swift are one of the last remaining migratory bird species to arrive back here in the UK, and they are also one of the first to leave, spending just 3 months or so here. And in my case, my birds were nesting here for just 2 months and 18 days. So everything they do is rapid, and generally they'll lay their first egg about 10 days after arriving back. So here we are at day 13 already and still no egg. I was glued to my screens every morning, waiting for the swifts to wake up and move off the cup to show me any sign something had happened during the night, but I was left wanting. The urge to nest build and to make sure everything was perfect was strong the whole way through the season, but particularly before the chicks arrived. Bedding was carried in and then taken out all season long. On the 24th, I had a few heart-stopping moments. I happened to be out front photographing my birds leaving the box when one bird leaving got caught up on something temporarily inside the box. Still to this day, I've no idea what happened. Even after taking the box down at the end of the season and having a good look inside, I still have no idea what happened. The only thing I can think of is that it got its claw caught in the joint between the floor and the side, but luckily it only ever happened once. On the 25th of May, 15 days after they returned, I woke up and checked the box first thing and was ecstatic to find something in the box, and it wasn't just the swifts. Swifts are incredibly clean nesters, and if you look carefully, you'll now see that there's poop all over the box, a sure sign that an egg had been laid the night before. But they were definitely not giving up their little secret quickly, and I had to wait until the evening to actually see the egg in all its glory. One small white oval egg had been laid during the night before and then sat on all day by one of the adults, only giving me a chance to see it at about 9:20 that evening, when both adults moved off the nest cup and gave me a nice clear view. The general clutch size for common swifts is typically 2 to 3 eggs, though clutches of 1 to 4 eggs can occur, with 2 being the most common number laid. The 26th of May passed pretty uneventfully, with one bird sitting on the egg just about all day, and I'm not sure what was happening here, whether it was another mating attempt or not, but I don't think it was successful. Followed by yet more nesting material being brought in. And then on the 27th, 2 days after the laying of the first egg, I awoke to fresh poo around the nest cup, again an indicator something had happened overnight, only to discover 2 eggs now laying in the nest cup. Sitting duties are shared by both male and female bird. These birds are monomorphic, being they look almost identical, and I'm yet to figure out a way of telling them apart in the box. So I can't tell you what bird is arriving and which is leaving here. But the leaving bird would often stop on the landing area before leaving the box to feed, and once or twice both birds would leave the box, leaving the eggs looking very vulnerable. Incubation of the eggs is roughly 19 to 25 days, so during the next 3 weeks the birds settled into a good routine of sitting, feeding, sleeping and bringing in nesting material, and the days slowly ticked away. The birds can feed up to 40 miles away, so periods of anything happening in the box was a long drawn-out process, and often the eggs were left completely on their own. Well, not entirely on their own, because I was nervously watching over them. Even on day 22, they were still bringing in feathers. I guess you can never have enough, can you? The other thing I found interesting was the sitting bird's reluctance to get up and leave the eggs, so much so that it was normal for the returning bird to actually dig in underneath the sitting bird and physically force it off the eggs. Their instinct to sit was so strong. As the season progressed towards June, temperatures started to rise and the birds began panting to reduce heat stress on their bodies. Birds can't sweat and so pant to move cool air over moist surfaces in their mouth and lungs, causing evaporation, which carries the heat away with it, much like a panting dog. I love the fact that no matter what happened during the day, both birds would spend the night together in the box. I ended up not using that red light at all and only used the white light for literally seconds every early evening to make sure everything was okay, and then left them to it the rest of the night, and they were really not bothered. On the 14th of June there was a noticeable change in behaviour, with the birds bringing in several feathers during the day. The nest was now even furnished with a nice green parakeet feather, and I even spotted the birds flying over the house carrying down yet more feathers into the nest cup. This continued most of the day on the 14th, and I started to suspect they knew something we didn't. The impending hatching of chicks was close. I'll let this next clip play out in full to give you some indication of how reluctant the sitting bird is to get up and leave its duties. The night of the 14th I was highly suspicious something was up, so checked in on them before going off to sleep, just to make sure I hadn't missed anything, but the 2 eggs were safe and sound. Waking up on the 15th, I went straight to my cameras and knew immediately something was up. Not only were the birds fussing with something in the nest cup, but if you listen closely you can also hear the faint chirping of a chick. But do you think they'd give me a view of their new arrival? No chance. For that I had to wait another 5 hours when a returning bird came in with its first feed. The adult bird stepped aside to show one blind little pink featherless chick in the nest cup and giving it its first feed. The second egg was yet to hatch, but remember it was laid 2 days after the first, so it would take a little while longer. I didn't have to wait long for the second chick to hatch, and on the 16th of June, 38 days after arriving back to breed, they had successfully hatched both chicks. If you look carefully between the adults here, you'll see both chicks in the nest cup, with a bit of the egg of one remaining still to be removed by the adults. This would now signal the start of the busiest time for the adults, having to keep up with quickly growing chicks, and as you'll see in the coming footage, the speed at which they grew and their insatiable appetite was truly amazing to watch. Just 2 days later on the 18th, the chicks had already grown substantially, and even the dark blotches under their skin were showing the advancement of coming feathers. Swifts really do live up to their name in all aspects of life. Common swifts take about 5 to 8 weeks from hatching to fledging, though it can vary slightly with weather and food, with many fledging at around 6 weeks, preparing for their long migration to Africa. Like all chicks, swiftlets have a truly insatiable desire for food and can't seem to get enough. During the earlier period after hatching, the adults feed them more often, but in smaller amounts, about 8 to 12 times a day, depending on the availability of food items. Later on, the chicks are left for longer periods and are only fed 3 to 6 times a day, but in larger quantities. Swifts are very much affected by bad weather, when their prey items hunker down, and the chicks might only be fed 1 to 3 times a day. The adults catch their prey on the wing and consist of tiny flying insects and spiders, sometimes referred to as aerial plankton. They gather hundreds or even thousands at a time and pack them into a pouch in their throat, and together with saliva it's formed into a sticky food ball called a bolus. This weighs about 3 grams, which is about 8% of the average swift's weight. If you convert that to a human-sized ball, it would be about 7 kilograms, packed full of protein. If we break one apart as Mark Smith has done here, we'll find it's rammed with tightly packed insects. Mark has taken the time to have these tested to see what they consist of, and found the following, which he has very kindly allowed me to share with you. This diagram shows the contents of just one bolus he found under his nest boxes, but what he has also done is record the droppings over a whole season, and found the following recording the top 10 insects taken by swifts in 2024. When the chicks are very young, only small portions of the bolus are handed over, often resulting in both chicks being fed in one visit. But of course, as the chicks get bigger, the entire bolus is taken by a single chick, and it was often just a case of a lucky positioning in the nest when the returning adults arrived as to whether you got fed or not. But I think the law of averages makes sure that both chicks got their full. Chicks can also slow their metabolism down and survive long gaps between feeds, but luckily my chicks were well fed throughout the season. Here you can see the adult has passed over half the bolus, which the chick quickly swallows. In fact, you can still see it sitting in its throat. It then looks around for another hungry beak to feed, but by the looks of it, the chicks are now full. But of course, an hour or two later, the chicks are hungry again, and the adults feed them another healthy-looking bolus of insects. Swifts arrive back in the UK in waves, so when using playback to try and entice them down to your nest boxes, you want to aim this at a particular wave. The first wave back in April and early May are the breeding birds returning to their historical nesting sites. Swifts are incredibly faithful to their nest sites, so 9 times out of 10 you won't have much luck attracting any of these birds away, unless of course they've lost their nest sites in the previous years. Swifts are so faithful to a site they might lose a whole season of breeding in an attempt to still try and get into their old breeding site. It really is heartbreaking to see. The second wave comes back in end of May and into June and consists of second and third year birds looking to start nesting, and these are the ones you're aiming for. So this is when you start using playback in earnest. As I've said before, early morning and late afternoon is best, when flocks of swift gather in numbers and will definitely react to playback. Next up is the third and final wave, arriving in middle of June. These are mainly 1-year-old birds returning for the first time. They might find your box, but will only be using it for roosting overnight until they return in future years to start nest building. By the 21st of June, 6 days after hatching, the chicks have doubled in size and grown quickly, still blind and featherless, but instinctively know not to defecate in their own nest cup, and will reverse out backwards to drop their fecal sacs outside the cup. Fecal sacs are mucous membranes produced by nesting birds that encases the feces, allowing the adults to remove this from the nesting area without making a mess of it. Most bird species will carry the sac a short distance and then drop it, but not swift. They recycle the sac by eating it, getting valuable nutrients from partially digested food, providing themselves with quick energy. Removal of these sacs obviously keep the nest sanitary, but also reduces parasites and predators near the site. Eating it also saves time and energy. This clip shows when the chicks are still young, one bolus can feed both chicks as shown here, giving half to each one. Just 4 days later, on the 25th of June, the chicks have become covered in their bluish downy feathers, and their primary flight feathers have started growing, still covered in their sheaths. Their feeding sessions have now become a chaotic first-come, first-served grabbing experience, but once they realize no more is coming, they quickly quieten down. Here you can see one of the adults picking up and eating one of those fecal sacs. On the 28th of June, 13 days after hatching, I found two very downy chicks asleep in their nest cup, but that wasn't the most exciting thing of the day, and neither was seeing this chick take its first poo of the day. But if you look closely, you can now see their eyes are opening, taking their first look at the world around them, and seeing my camera in the box for the first time too. The chicks were really taking shape, and with their new downy feathers keeping them warm, this freed up both adults to go out looking for food. The 28th of June was a huge leap in their development. Not only were their eyes opening, but this also marked the day they started building those flight muscles that would carry them through the rest of their lives. This is the first time I saw them exercising in the box, and they would do this increasingly right up until the day they left from the box. You'll see now the adults are no longer sharing the bolus between the chicks. Those days are long gone. It was now one whole bolus per chick, so it was just as well both adults are now out looking for food. I love how they instinctively know if their sibling is exercising to keep as low as you can in the nest cup, otherwise you're going to get a smack in the head by a wing beat. They knew there was no point exercising together, so it was always just one chick at a time doing their thing, until towards the end when it was every chick for themselves. Swifts are some of the cleanest birds to have nesting on your house. There's no messy nesting material on the floor under the box, and no feces splattered on the walls around the nest site. Most, if not all, fecal sacs are removed, and apart from a bit of staining on the walls inside the box, it's pretty clean, compared to other species of cavity nesting birds. "15 days after hatching, I came home from work to find one of my chicks was now out the nest cup for the first time, followed promptly by the other just 30 minutes later. Young featherless chicks falling out the nest cup early on would almost certainly be fatal, as they rely heavily on their adult birds keeping them warm at night, and also a young bird out the cup would be missed during feeding sessions and might starve to death. So I've always told myself if this were to happen, I'd step in and return the helpless chick back into the cup. But at this stage it was perfectly normal for the birds to go walkabout, and luckily for me they didn't go near the entrance hole. I was anxious to see what this chick on the landing area would do. Would it be able to return to the nest cup, or be forced to spend its first night out on its own? But after 45 minutes of freedom, it waddled back up the ramp and into the nest cup, with me looking on grateful I'd put those ramps in the first place. June slipped away and we moved into the beginning of July. The chicks started looking more and more like miniature versions of the adults, with their flight feathers coming along nicely, although still partly encased in their protective sheaths. They had lost a lot of their initial downy body feathers and were exercising more and more in the box, doing their classic swift push-ups, building those flight muscles. When swiftlets leave the box, they have one chance to get it right, so it's crucially important they are in tip-top condition when they do so. Unlike other species whose chicks have the ability to jump around nearby tree branches, swiftlets go from 0 to hero, and that's it for what could be up to 2 years on the wing, remembering that some first-year birds may not return until they're 2 years old by staying in Africa on the wing. The swiftlets were also becoming more and more aware of their surroundings, with this bird probably noticing the small light around the camera coming on and off as I logged in to check up on them. The other thing I loved seeing were how the swiftlets went from cute, sleepy, loving siblings to the all-out chaos of a feeding session in a matter of seconds. This is a typical morning scene in the nest box most mornings. The entire family unit huddled as best they can into the nest cup. Note how clean the nest box is. The only feces there is that of the female the night she laid her eggs. I especially loved watching my swiftlets during the quieter times between feeds when they were on their own. They were very affectionate, often preening each other and snuggling up for warmth, and of course watching them exercising their wing muscles. Often I'd hear them knocking right through the wall of my house and knew exactly what they were up to. They have now lost almost all their feather sheaths and downy feathers, and soon the best way to tell them apart in the melee of a feeding session were their white faces and white edgings to their feathers, which remained until the day they fledged. I soon realized with my car parked in front of the house it was perfectly situated to use as a hide. Sitting in the driver's seat, I had direct line of sight to the box. I then went one step further and used my mobile phone from the car to remote into my PC in the study to be able to see what was happening on the cameras from inside the car. All very technical, but what this allowed me to do was relax in the car until I saw them approaching the exit and then get ready to photograph. The adults continued to make sure the nest box was kept clean by recycling those fecal sacs. Then late on the afternoon of the 9th, the chicks finally realized they had a view to the big wide world looking out the entrance hole, and they were hooked. Still extremely shy, they backed away every time I approached below, so I had to use the car as a hide again to get my first real glimpses of the chicks experiencing the world for the first time, getting these few shots before they retreated back inside. Just 25 days after hatching, the swiftlets are looking more and more adult-like as the days pass. Here's a good view of those short stubby legs of theirs, which are more claws than anything else, and when viewed from behind next to an adult on the right, only the wing length and white-edged feathers give them away. You just gotta love a box full of swifts, don't you? And I love the fact they're all trying to sleep in the nest cup as though there's no other space available in the box. And remember at the beginning when I said it ends up being a box full of wings at the end? Well, this is what I meant. And there's also absolutely no problem literally roosting on top of each other as long as you're still in the nest cup. This is also when I noticed a dirty smudge right in the middle of my camera, circled in red here. We still had about 5 days of filming left before the end of the season, so I was going to have to make a plan to clean the lens with minimal interference to the birds. Lifting the roof was just not an option for me. But looking up at the box from outside, I realized I could see the lens from the entrance hole, which meant I could put a bit of damp toilet paper on the end of a stick and clean off the lens. So I waited for both adults to leave and quickly sprung into action. Up the ladder and straight in. I was in and out like a thief in the night, making sure everything was clean with a flashlight at the end before leaving the chicks in peace again. And just a couple of minutes later, it was as though nothing had happened and they were back to looking out at the world again. With just 4 days remaining in the box, the chicks took to exercising their flight muscles to a new level. At just about every opportunity, they were at it, doing incredibly fast wing beats and of course doing those classic swiftlet push-ups that swifts are so famous for. Anything to build those flight muscles. This is just a cut clip from a much larger sequence where this particular chick did this for some time, much to the annoyance of its sibling, having to hunker down quietly in the corner and wait for it all to end. At this point, the adult swifts were only returning a couple of times a day to feed the swiftlets, almost willing them on to leave the box and feed themselves. I had to be lucky to catch them in the box during the day. The 24th of July was a very nerve-wracking day for me. Common swifts normally fledge between 5 and 6 weeks after hatching, and we were precisely there. Apart from their white face markings and white-edged feathers, they had lost all their downy feathers and were basically ready to go. I spent hours that day watching them through the cameras, anticipating the bittersweet moment they'd eventually go, and was on the edge of my seat when both chicks had a long, hard look out the entrance hole, much braver than they'd ever been. I grabbed a few shots of them, knowing my time with them was nearly at an end. Little did I know it at the time, but the night of the 24th would be the last time I'd see my swifts as a family unit in the box again, all huddled up as they'd always been. I'd been watching them for 77 straight days, rushing home from work to log into my cameras before my work bag even hit the ground, but I guess all good things must come to an end. And then it was D-Day, as in departure day. I woke up early at about 6 o'clock before getting ready to go to work and checked on the cameras. Both adults were long gone already, and it was just the 2 chicks left. I had a real sense of abode that morning. I could almost feel the tension in the box. Swiftlets generally fledge early morning or early evening, and with one swiftlet looking long and hard out the box and the other literally climbing the walls, it wasn't going to be long now. After watching them for half an hour practicing flight in the box, I had to get ready for work. I figured if they hadn't gone by now, it would maybe be an evening fledging, and had to leave the cameras and get ready for work. Of course, checking up on the cameras at every pass, only to find them still practicing or staring intently out the entrance hole. It would literally take a hiccup and they'd be gone without me seeing. And then the dreaded commute to work needed to take place. I literally ran into work from the bus stop, logged into my work PC, and from there remote accessed my home PC, then turned on the cameras to find the swiftlets still in the box. Or were they? One swiftlet was sat in the nest cup, and when I changed cameras to view the entrance hole side of the box, there was nothing there. One chick had fledged. It had fledged sometime between hopper 7 and hoppers 8 in the morning, and with its sibling now gone and more space in the box, the remaining chick went into overdrive, basically practicing for the rest of the day. I was glued to the cameras in the box all day at work, but the remaining chick nervously held back for the right moment. And then on the evening of the 25th, at about 20 to 10 in the evening, after a long hard look out the box, that moment had arrived, and the last remaining chick slipped into the unknown, and not a day too soon either, because I was leaving on holiday the very next day. After arriving at my holiday destination, I of course immediately logged onto my cameras to check what was happening in the box, and to find out if the adults had roosted there overnight without the chicks being there, and they had, and were still enjoying themselves in the peace and quiet there at 7 o'clock in the morning. They had successfully completed their first breeding season, and I was incredibly proud of them. They had done an amazing job at raising their 2 chicks to fledgling age. It took me 3 long years to attract swifts to my house, but I would do it all again in a heartbeat. I mean, what a bird to have nesting on your house, and what a privilege it was to host them. Swifts breed for life and faithfully return to the same nest for years, if not decades, so I'll hopefully be enjoying them for years to come. But remember, our swifts are in need of your help, so do me and them a favor by putting up a nest box. They get a home and you get the enjoyment of watching them at close quarters throughout the season. And by doing so, we do our little bit to ensure our kids and their kids get to look up in the sky and see screaming swifts, Britain's best bird. I'll leave you now to enjoy the last moments of my swifts in the 2025 breeding season. I enjoyed them for exactly 79 days. It's amazing to think that when they leave the box in the next few seconds, they will not land for another 10 months, and a long 6,000 kilometer journey awaits them. How they get there and what they'll see along the way, only they will know. But I pray for their safe return so I can enjoy them in the years to come and share all their adventures with you. But for now, for me, it's a long, nervous waiting game until May next year. Before I end this video with a little montage of the season, I'd just like to thank a few people who contributed massively to this video. First up, contributing his amazing swift photographs to the project, and without which this video would have had a totally different look and feel, is Joe Downing. You can follow him on both X and Instagram with the following handle, removing the @ for Instagram. Next up, graciously sharing his slides, photos and incredible swift knowledge to the video is Mark Smith, who can also be found and followed on the X platform as shown here. And last but not least is the incredible website from which I gathered a vast amount of information from, and who very willingly allowed me to use a lot of their web content in my video, and that is Action for Swifts. I've placed their web address in the description below. Well, that's it for the 2025 breeding season, leaving us lots of questions, like will my swifts return? Will they be successful again? Will they bring in another pair for me? Or will next year be plain sailing or filled with drama? Only time will tell. But for now, we have to wait for their safe return.